Hi, I'm Jennifer Terri. I make Philippine Travel Updates. If you're somebody, most of these viewers of these videos would be foreigners. If you guys have been waiting to enter the Philippines and you want to know as soon as we reopen, then consider subscribing to this channel because that's what I do. So in this video, I'll give you an update. So there was a very interesting and very insightful interview with the Department of Tourism. Department of Tourism is also an IATF member. She's one of those people with power to announce the reopening and make decisions about it. So let's hear it from her. What is the update on international tourism on reopening, and what's the situation of domestic or tourism in the Philippines, and what is their plans? So I will share some snippets of the interview and I will also summarize it. So the interview started with a question: what's the situation of the tourism industry in the Philippines right now? So vaccination rates have been increasing in the country. Thank you to our steady supply of vaccine. Cases are going down, and because of that, a lot of domestic destinations have reopened, and the vaccination rate in Manila and the National Capital Region is very high. In fact, they have allowed traveling. So a lot of people from Manila are traveling throughout the country, and that is good for our domestic tourism. And more than like 12 destinations have opened their areas to fully vaccinated individuals, but even unvaccinated can still travel. So don't worry, unvaccinated people can still travel here. But let's say if you want to enter Cebu and you're fully vaccinated, you can just show your vaccination card and you don't need to get tested. You don't need a negative test result. So yes, our domestic tourism have improved so much compared to us to like 3 months ago. So we have reopened a lot of domestic destinations. But even if domestic tourism is open, is allowed, and Filipinos are traveling within the country, Jennifer, international tourism is closed. Foreign tourists is still not allowed, and they bring so much to our country. To what extent can the recovery be hinged simply on domestic travel? Can the Philippines recover by just relying on domestic tourism?
A lot of it is domestic driven. To what extent can the recovery be hinged simply on domestic travel at this point?
Well, as I've said, it's about 85% of the contribution of tourism to the country. But it also helps that Balikbayans, which is our third largest market, is allowed in the country as of today. So number one would be Korea is our number one market. Number two is China. Number three is from the US. And those are mainly Balikbayans, and they're allowed. As of today, the quarantine has been reduced from 10 days to 5 days for the Balikbayans, but we're still looking at maybe lowering it so that, especially for the Christmas season, because that's when the Balikbayans start coming home.
The tourism industry in the Philippines contributed to about 12.8% of the GDP before pandemic. More than 85% of that is domestic. So 15% is like international. Yes, majority of tourism is domestic tourism. But Secretary Puyat emphasized that even though we're close, at least the third biggest market for international tourism, Balikbayans, mainly from the US, are allowed. Yes, they can travel. Former Filipinos, foreign spouse, and children of Filipinos or former Filipinos can enter the country. With her answer, guys, I kind of get a hint that it's not so much about foreign tourism, international tourism, but domestic tourism. Like international tourism is not the biggest thing. But still, the reporter continued on and asked the Department of Tourism, can you give us a working timetable on when the Philippines would reopen the border to foreign tourists? Tourism Secretary answered that first, we're hoping as more and more people are vaccinated, so vaccination status or rate is the main thing for us to reopen. And mind you guys, today they just announced mandatory vaccinations for workers. We'll discuss it in another video, but yeah. To continue, Secretary Puyat said that less quarantine, they're hoping for less quarantine or no quarantine at all. We're hoping to reduce the quarantine days. We're always pushing for reopening. Oh, really? Oh, but the Philippines is quite unique. We not only have foreign tourists, but we have also OFWs coming home. Yes, if you guys don't know, more than 10 million Filipinos are outside the Philippines working. Some have moved permanently in another country. Yes, Philippines is one of the biggest market for labor export. So it's also a consideration for the Philippines. Now, with less quarantine days, I've been pushing for foreign tourists, at least from green lanes, to be able to enter the country. I know you guys are not from green lanes. A lot of you are not from. So you still cannot enter even if they do this. Who is covered by green lanes? China, Hong Kong, Japan, UAE. When would foreign tourists, at least from green lanes, would be allowed? She said that it's hopefully soon, but it's hard to say. The government really now is just focused on achieving that 50% target population. That is the goal of the Philippine government for this year, to be able to vaccinate 50% of their target population before the year ends. But she said that the Philippines has a similar target like with other countries. Like, Singapore is reopening or having travel bubbles with selected countries. But why? Why can't we just open to all countries? But as for what she said, it's always about balance between health and safety. And they always look at the vaccination rate. But we are close to achieving the 100% target for adult population in the National Capital Region in Manila. So that's a very big boost in reducing the quarantine days. And possibly no quarantine even from yellow countries. And of course, the reporter mentioned China. So where is China? Yes, we know China is on green list. And China is the second market for foreign tourists. Is that the reason, Secretary, that you're pushing for reopening for green lanes? I don't know, but for her, she's just happy that domestic tourism is allowed. See, we are looking at travel bubbles with other countries because entering the Philippines may not require quarantine, but going back to respective countries is a different thing. Like, she is quite strict. So yeah, like for example, entering the Philippines, no worries, no quarantine. But then a traveler from the Philippines entering Hong Kong, 14 days or 21 days quarantine. Oh my gulay. But why are you worried about quarantine days going back to their countries? That's for them to think about. And anyways, if you think about UK, America, Canada, they're also our biggest markets for foreign tourists, and their countries will not require them to quarantine when they return. How about look at them, Secretary, not just Asia. Speaking of travel bubble, there's a particular country in which they're looking at and having talks.
Korea, of course, they're our number one tourists. They've been wanting to have chartered flights. Korea to Bohol, or to even right now they're looking at Bohol chartered flights from Korea, but then they're still trying to figure out the quarantine days coming back. So we're still in talks. There's no problem coming here. We could already reduce the quarantine. We can actually remove the quarantine from Korea, but their problem is now going back. But it's like in any other country. It's always a moving target. But we're looking at all the major tourist destinations. But it's really Korea that has shown interest in traveling to the country.
So the two countries are ironing out quarantine requirements for these tourists upon return to South Korea. Oh, wow, South Korea. Oh well. In summary, guys, of course, she's been pushing to reopen, but she's not the only one making decisions. Of course, a lot of people are involved in it, in the IATF. But in that interview, I didn't felt the vibe that they were that reopening to international tourists is a priority, or is a something that they want to deal with. Like how she kept emphasizing that the tourism sector is 85% made up of domestic tourism. I just didn't feel like it in the video, but hey, they're talking about it, so it's still good news. I know it's disappointing that there is really no definite info as to reopening in the interview, despite questions asked by the reporter. But I'm still firm that next year we will reopen. So please encourage your family here to get vaccinated. That's the way they can help to reopen soon. But yeah, this is all. What do you guys think about this interview? And I'll see you guys with more info. I'll see you in another reopening update. Let me know what you think about this.